Hello, beautiful friends and listeners and folks who are part of the unfolding mystery. Thank you for listening to Conscious Conversion. It's a weekly podcast about how we bridge the gap between business and spirit, money and meaning, technology and regeneration in a wildly changing world. In a time of so much polarity and uncertainty, this podcast explores how together we are connecting across the planet, across our differences, and across dimensions as we build the new earth together. I am your host, Sarah Yemtich, and today I am absolutely delighted to introduce to you my friend, Beth Weinstein, a spiritual business coach who helps aspiring entrepreneurs align with their purpose and grow their business so that they can help more people be fulfilled in what they do and have a thriving business working when, how, and where they want. She's also the founder of the Psychedelic Entrepreneur Podcast, as well as the annual Psychedelic Sacred Medicines Purpose and Business Online Conference. She's been a speaker on multiple stages, podcasts, and online summits, featured in New York Post, the Plant Spirit Summit, the Psilocybin Summit, the Huffington Post, Time Out New York, Thrillist, and more. And entheogenic medicines have played a super important role in Beth's life for over 25 years. Many of her clients are also on this path, which is why she was called to discuss the interconnection between expanded states through visionary medicines, one's purpose, and transformational entrepreneurship. Beth, thank you so much for being here. We met like 2 years ago on the first iteration of this podcast.
Or earlier. Yeah.
Maybe 3 years ago.
Three, maybe. Yeah.
It might have been 3 years ago. Anyway, we met in the first iteration of this podcast, and I am very happy to welcome you back so we can go even more expansive into all the interdimensional realms, because one of our shared favorite topics is psychedelic entheogen medicine, plant medicines. And I'm super excited to get your perspective on things today.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me here. It's so good to be back.
Yay. And you were just in Costa Rica too.
Yes. I was there twice for the majority of the winter. It was very nice.
So cool. Yeah.
I'll be back.
I know, we've got to get it aligned so that we can actually hang out in person. We kept threatening to, and then I think I had to bail for some reason. I don't know. Anyway, we're going to get it together one of these days.
Totally.
So I'm really excited to hear your perspective on how plant medicines and entheogens are part of the unfolding of the new paradigm. And first, I want to ask you just the big question of on the planet right now, in this moment, in this incarnation as Beth, what is your soul's purpose?
I love this question. To make it really short and to the point, my soul's purpose is to love. So I'm a student of A Course in Miracles, amongst other, spiritual traditions, and the Buddhist path and the meditation path, mindfulness path. And really, when it comes down to it, it's I really believe that we're just here to love and radiate love and be in our hearts as much as possible. So that's kind of the short answer, as I've been kind of going deep into this a lot lately of my own, is well, what is it all about? But if we bring it into the tangible 3D earth plane of okay, well, what's your purpose when it comes to what you do and what you put out there in the world? While it is love and it is my heart, I really feel that my mission is to help the healers and transformational teachers in this world get their work out to the world in a bigger way so that they can actually help more people and create transformation on the planet. So I help a lot of coaches, healers, therapists, psychedelic entrepreneurs start up and grow their business. And my goal is for them to reach more people, because people need help during these chaotic and interesting and somewhat beautiful, very beautiful times. I do believe we're going through this major transition and people just need help. I am constantly saying myself, how do people survive in this day and age without having support around them? I need support. You need community, you need people, you need help from others who have gone before you. So my goal in my deeper mission of why I'm incarnated here at this time, I believe, at least for now, is just that, is to really help people come into their hearts and really share what I call like your unique medicine. Like, what are you here to do? And have it reach more people, because the more transformation that we have on the planet, the more one person comes into their heart and knows who they are and really figures out their authenticity and lives their truth, the more that every human on this planet does this, the more that I think we're going to have a better world and then we're going to see change. So it really does come back to this one point, which is be love. So I essentially help people be in their hearts, and like really tap into what their soul's purpose is. Like, why are you incarnated here during these times? And really that's what it all boils down to. Does that make sense?
Totally. Absolutely. I mean, I feel like that's my path too, is like really, really like coming from a deep place of love as much as possible, being in my heart as much as possible, radiating that out enough to, connect with others who are living in that similar way and inspire others to live in a similar way. Because honestly, the more we're each self-expressed, right, like, and fully self-expressed, the more that we are aligning, I think, with the nature of the divine, the divine purpose, which is like creation and art and love and joy. So yay. I'm curious how, because we have this common interest, I'm sure we have lots and lots of common interests, but
Yes.
one of them is entheogens, or psychedelic plant medicines. And how do the entheogens and the psychedelic plant medicines help you fulfill that beautiful purpose of yours?
Yeah, so this is kind of what I've been talking about for a few years. I've done a bunch of summits around this interconnection between the growth of psychedelics and sacred medicines and coming into transformational entrepreneurship, and through this path of finding purpose. So I believe there are a lot of humans, especially here in the Western world, especially in the US, that were born and programmed into a life of just surviving and doing what it takes to just make it. And, sucking it up. And even if you don't like it, it's all about making money and surviving, and then you die, which I think, hasn't really been serving for humanity or the planet or the earth itself. So really what happens is when people step onto this path of working with medicines or psychedelics, depending on which ones, I guess, but most, not all, but most of them. And when they really tap into this place of an expanded consciousness, of a new altered state, it also does this, many of them have this effect where it really opens you up to the truth of who you really are. It opens up your heart. It has you see the nature of reality in a different light, because again, there's the programmed reality that we were all taught to believe. And then there's this kind of truth reality, which, for everybody, the truth is different. But really, it's the nature of who we really are in our deepest core essence, which is we're all children of the great creator of what you might call spirit or the universe or God. And we are all just beings interconnected, intertwined, the same as any animal, any plant on the earth. And we're all given the same opportunity to love and be loved and experience the pleasure and beauty and joy and abundance of life. But of course, we've been, especially humans, we've been programmed to believe one way and really gotten by through lots of trauma and defense patterns. And we've been stuck in this way of living that doesn't really serve us. And this is what, to me, in my opinion, is causing a lot of the depression, anxiety, PTSD, and loneliness and disconnection on the planet. So what happens is when you, let's say, work intentionally with sacred plant medicine, or let's say a psilocybin, ayahuasca, wachuma, toad medicines, doesn't really matter, even LSD, ketamine, all do this, MDMA, they open you up to this new way of being. And this really taps you into these questions or these feelings in your body and your soul, where you start to feel like, well, wait a second, that's not working for me, or this is the root of my unhappiness or dissatisfaction, or you start to have these downloads or awarenesses or intuitive hits that come through that are telling you something else. And very often they are completely different than the way you've been living. Like, I know for me, it was like living this career and job and lifestyle that I thought I was supposed to do, but it really wasn't making me happy. I was really not getting any joy out of it. Even as I made more money, even as I lived a glamorous life, it wasn't really, the depths of fulfillment wasn't there. And I do believe the human soul is here to really experience what it means to be truly fulfilled, and not fulfilled by being able to buy more shit on Amazon, but fulfilled in your heart and your soul, where, you know, it's beyond the money. It's really this like bliss living of like, wow, I'm actually living my full truth. So I do believe these medicines help people really open up to seeing this other reality, which to me is more of this truth reality, and open up the heart. And when that starts to happen, and then, you know, maybe a spiritual awakening is happening in conjunction, or maybe one takes up other practices, meditation, certain healing modalities, breath work, whatever it is, you know, all of these modalities and all of these different states, they bring you out of the head, out of the ego, that is the part that's like fear-based and scarcity-based and telling you all these stories. And they bring you more into your natural state, which is a love-based, heart-centered state where your heart is actually in control, where your intuition is in control, meaning like this is coming from a source beyond you. And I believe that these medicines are growing in popularity, you know, over the last 30, 40 years, and also exponentially, you know, the last, whatever, 10, 15, 20 years, for a reason. You know, it's not a random coincidence that psychedelics are becoming decriminalized and gaining popularity and coming into the mainstream as the world gets also more chaotic, more turmoil, more divisiveness, more separation, more, you know, wars, issues. I could go on. So, and it's not just the medicines, it's these larger spiritual awakenings happening. You know, meditation became more popular, yoga became more popular, healthy living, healthy eating, you know, breath work. I could go on and on. But I think they're all here for this reason, to help us with this larger awakening that's happening on the planet, with what I believe, and I know you believe, is there's actually a new earth, as they call it, you know, being reborn or being birthed. And we're coming into this whole other paradigm. And that includes really waking up to ask yourself, like, how am I living? And like, what's the point of this all? You know, like, why am I here? Especially as we have, you know, this pandemic that's been thrown in our face for over 2 years now. It's like, you kind of have no choice but to face death in front of you every day and say, like, well, what is the point of this one incarnation I've been given? So I do believe the psychedelics and plant medicines really, they help people really open up these doors to questioning everything and really feeling, instead of thinking, but feeling like, what is it that I really want? And it, you know, it doesn't have to be start a business, but it's really about like, you know, what's making your soul happy? What's making you feel joy? What's making you feel inspired to get out of bed every morning? You know, and I feel like our society has just been so trapped in these illusions and these, you know, the rat race, as it's called, of trying to get by. And then that's what's creating a lot of the misery that people are feeling, like the depression that's always on the rise, and the anxiety and the PTSD and the, you know, one mental disorder after another. It's like, you have to ask yourself, well, what's at the root of all this? And that's where I believe these medicines are here to really stir this up, wake it up. And it's not always easy, but you know, it's not a coincidence they're gaining popularity at this time. So that's the long, short answer.
I know I'm sure you could go on for days talking about that, and I would welcome every word. I'm curious, like, when did you feel called to the medicines? Do you feel like, and even I want to ask this even more specific yes or no question first, is like, did you feel called? Like, did the medicine actually call you in?
I love that question. It's very funny when I look back on my childhood, which is when it actually all started, believe it or not. I had this one experience at quite a young age, and I have no awareness of how old or young I was, but it was probably around like 8 years old, 7, 8, or 9, and is what I would maybe consider now some kind of a third eye activation of sorts. I mean, obviously I was sober, I was quite young, but it was definitely my first non-ordinary state experience of really tapping into something else. Of course, at the time, I didn't know what it was, and honestly, I still don't know what it was, but it was it was an altered state. And at that age, when it actually happened, I remember I was laying on the grass, laying on the earth, and I was asking these questions, like speaking to myself, right? And I remember I was inquiring about what is inside here, like what's in our brain, how does this work? I remember at this very young age actually being really curious about, like, how is this working? Like, what is this voice I'm hearing? Like, where is this coming from? And so I actually spent time like going in and like closing my eyes and trying to see. I remember it was like, I would tell myself I'm trying to see inside my brain because I was just curious. And that's when I had this first like non-ordinary state experience. And then when I was 14, I was given this hit of acid without really even understanding I kind of knew what it did, but I didn't really know what it did. And I took it just because, purely curious. And I ended up taking my very first psychedelic journey by myself in my bedroom with my mom or whoever, both my parents down the hall. And I laid there in my bedroom for like the whole entire 8 hours by myself because unfortunately the guy gave me this hit of acid. And I had a curfew because I was only 14. I had to be home by a certain time. And the acid actually didn't kick in until I was actually at home brushing my teeth and I looked in the mirror and I was like, so I feel that, and that did something, right? Like that experience really shifted something big in me where I always say, like, if I didn't have that experience at a young age and also by myself, like literally, my parents were asleep. I wasn't allowed to like run around and make noise or else they would know what was going on. I just sometimes wonder if I was given this path for the reason that I am speaking about this very publicly now, because the other experiences in my life when it came to psychedelics and plant medicines, later on in my teens and late teens and early 20s, that's when it really got going. It was kind of like, it just kept happening to me. Like there was never this desire in me. It just kind of fell into my like being, based on, I like to dance. So I went out dancing and the next thing you know, there's like drugs out there in the dance scene. And it was like, okay, well, this sounds cool. Like let's take, back then it was called ecstasy. Same thing with even, psilocybin, ayahuasca. When ayahuasca came to me and I had heard about it and I actually had been like, hell no, that sounds like really scary. And there's no way I could ever do that. And then it was kind of like this weird one, like right time, right place. Like I had been really deep into meditation on the Buddhist path. And I actually hadn't been doing any drugs for a few years. Like I had taken, very clean, like, just some alcohol here and there, but I wasn't really like partying and doing drugs at that time. And then ayahuasca came to me and it was kind of the right time, right place. And I said to myself, when I decided to do it, I happened to be in a very good like place, but also in a lot of transition in my life. So it kind of made sense. Or I was like, I'll give this a shot. And like, I said to myself, I'm going to just do this once. And I went because this friend of mine who I trusted, he's like, look, if you're going to do this, this is probably the best person you could do it with. It was actually the person I still work with today, who is a really incredible shaman from Peru, who's literally been doing this for 30 years, who's like walks the path. He's very traditional, like he's very well practiced. Like this is no joke, this guy. And I did it with the intention of never touching it again in my life. And again, I always wonder, like, why did I have that level of an experience for my first time? It took me into realms that I assumed everybody went to, and it actually took me a few years to realize that not a lot of people go there. My experience was definitely not the norm. It was definitely quite like life-changing, and it's very life-changing even if it's not that level. So I feel like it really just kept pulling me, it was like, and I actually didn't need to ever go do it again because I was already taken to the depths of understanding all the nature of reality in like my very first experience, and like major healings and major this, but then it just kind of was like this thing where it was like a call and also like really like deeply connected with the potential of the spirit. Like, I think that was another thing. It was just being so tapped into the spirit of these plants and really seeing like, I mean, because it's something I always knew as a kid, like growing up really connected to nature. Like I knew that it wasn't just us. I knew that these plants were like our allies. So I always had this depth of relationship with plants and animals and the natural world. So I really believe it was a calling, and I believe that some people are called onto the path like very deeply for a particular reason, and then some maybe just dabble and get their healing and move on, and that's totally fine too. But the people I know who've really made it like a part of their life, it's interesting to watch how much the medicine has then shaped everything else they do, meaning like what they do for a living, how they serve the world, how they give back to humanity. Like a lot of my good friends, like their entire life has been shaped by like, look, I'm just in service to the earth and humanity, and a lot of this has come through the medicine. And that's kind of how I see it now. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm so excited by that, just because I too had a peak experience for my first experience. I mean, I did mushrooms and acid and MDMA and ecstasy and all that when I was a kiddo. Not a kiddo, but a kiddo. And so I had that, but I had never had a ceremonial experience until 2018 when my mentor Munai took me to Chavin de Huantar in Peru, and which is the like mecca of this cactus medicine called Wachuma, otherwise known as San Pedro. I like to call it Wachuma though. It's San Pedro's like the Catholic name.
Yeah.
But Wachuma, it was the strongest medicine that you can get because it was wild cactus at the mecca of this wild cactus in the Andes mountains in the high desert. And this temple was built, the archaeologists say 4,500 years ago, and the renegade cosmologists say 35,000 years ago, similar to the Egyptian pyramids. And it was built for this purpose. And this amazing peak experience that like, I can't even go into it now because it's too much. I say sometimes that I got fucked by God and gave birth to the cosmos during that 2-week period, because that's basically what happened. Anyway, it was incredible. And I came back, and I swear I had just started my agency at the beginning of 2018. I didn't have a logo and all my branding yet. I came back and I created my entire like website logo branding based on that experience. My old logo is, I'm showing you now if you're watching, a modified version of the Chicana with like an eye and a flower inside and very like sort of psychedelic.
Beautiful.
And I didn't know what I was doing. It wasn't like I was intentionally saying I'm going to call in the plant medicine. You know what I mean? Like It was like I was channeling it and just doing whatever I was feeling intuitively guided to do. And now I'm going back to that temple in a couple months, and I'm sort of like waiting excitedly to see what unfolds with this mystery, because I do feel like the medicine calls me and I don't know to do what yet. And it's a really fun thing. What I believe is that, and I know you believe this too, is that the medicines are basically a way for Mother Earth to speak to us, like a lot more explicitly. I mean, there are many people who don't need that, who can sit, like, not many, there are a few people who can sit here and commune with nature and really hear Mother Earth, the voice of Mother Earth, without necessarily needing to take any medicines. But for many of us, it really opens something up so that we can hear. And anyway, I'm babbling at this point, but I just got really excited as you were talking, because it is really cool when your first experience is like that peak experience, and like, what does that mean? And it has shaped everything since then. Like, I'd already started the agency with spiritual entrepreneurs with the intention of like creating positive transformation on the earth, but it became so much deeper after that experience.
Amazing. I love it. I'm so excited for what's next for you.
Me too. Stay tuned, because I'm sure I'll talk about it a lot.
Amazing.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So I also want to tap back into some of the things that you were saying about, the nature of this podcast, or the subject of this podcast is sort of like, the old systems are crumbling. What are we building in its place? And, we both believe that entheogens, plant medicines, have a role to play in what we build. And if we're listening, and I have goosebumps as I'm talking right now, if we're truly listening to the voice of Mother Earth, Gaia, Source, whatever you want to call it, if we're truly listening to that, then I believe that we can be guided on what to build and how to build it.
Yeah.
And the work that you do is you're also, you work as a business coach, particularly with entrepreneurs who work with plant medicine. So there's the potential for a huge impact there. Can you talk more about sort of the kinds of entrepreneurs that you work with and the kind of work that you do in that realm?
Yeah. So this actually came through the medicine too, was that, many years ago, so I had already started out as a business coach and, woven in my spirituality and who I am. And the part of me that was in hiding was this part of me that was on this medicine path. And it came through the medicine that, because it shaped my path so much, even with my previous businesses and career, it's like, it shaped who I was even long before I became what I do today. And it started coming through basically saying like, well, why don't you talk about this interconnection between this medicine path and coming into your heart and having purpose and doing what you love. So I started speaking about it publicly back in I was talking about it a little, but I didn't come out fully until 2019. But essentially, I do help a lot of people who are on this path to start up and grow what I would call transformational businesses, healers, coaches, therapists, spiritual teachers, people who, some of my clients, not all of them, but many, who want to actually integrate either psychedelics or psychedelic integration into their offerings. It's a minority. I have some psychedelic therapists as clients, but people who've also been shaped by the medicine path, who can actually work with me and be inside of a program or be inside of a container where their coach knows what they're going through. To put it in perspective, I actually had 2 clients who just went on dietas, one in Ecuador and one in Peru. One was Ecuador, one was Peru, and then one had just come back from Peru. I have another client who actually, has her own business, but then also works at a retreat center with psilocybin down in Jamaica. Another one of my clients, their partner facilitates medicine ceremonies. Like, I've actually had a few of these clients. So I think a lot of it really is about being held in a container with someone who actually can understand what this path is like. Meaning, if someone just had a really powerful experience with their medicine, then they have someone like me who can actually help them integrate that into their business. So it's like, yes, I'm a business coach, but on a deeper level, I actually call myself, it's like the soul awakening and soul alignment coach. Like, because there's only so much marketing can do. Like, marketing works, yes, like to a point, but a huge part of this is really this deeper level journey into what is it that your soul is here to do, and what is it that you want to do the most, what's inspiring you, and how do you make this real so that you can reach more people, help more people, have more clients, make more money, and live the life that you want. So I do help a lot of people who are on the medicine path. Not everybody is, but a lot of my clients are on pretty deep spiritual paths, meaning they're open-minded to all the kind of woo-woo stuff that I bring into my offerings, because it's, I do go into embodiment work and energetic work and shifts in mindset and ways of reprogramming your mind, because it is so much deeper than just like doing marketing. Not to say marketing doesn't work, but just to say, especially in those first few years when you're really coming out of your shell and birthing something, and it's really scary, and you're really stepping into this deeper level of your authenticity, you do have to address what's going on in the mind, what's going on in the body, what's going on in your energy field, where you blocked energetically, what's really happening in the subconscious that's holding you back. So this is where I basically created my program based around what works for me. Like, these are all the modalities I've done over the years to get me to a really great place in my business, to be super successful and keep growing from there. And it's not just marketing, so that's where I was like, well, you need to do this somatic work. You need to learn how to reprogram your subconscious. You have to learn how to understand your thinking. And it all goes together, which then creates this deeper level of success where it's not just like, hey, run a bunch of ads and hope to God that I sell something, which, that can work too. But then it's like this deeper stuff is really what makes it a lot easier and makes it what I call, it makes you align with what is the divine abundance, meaning things get easier, things come into flow. I mean, not to say that millions of dollars don't land on your lap, but it isn't about the pushing and the struggle. It's about the alignment. It's about being on the right path that feels the most authentic to you and doing all this other work to clear whatever's in the way. So it's kind of like my container is almost like, it's almost like being in a shamanic journey for about 6 to 12 months. So just without like physical, there's no actual physical purging. Don't worry.
Right. There will be no puking on the,
No
on the
buckets.
floor, but in a bucket. Yeah, I mean, I totally agree about marketing. Marketing can only do so much. If you're not in alignment, with your soul's purpose and with what this planet needs right now, and what humanity needs right now, then no amount of Facebook ads and marketing is going to necessarily do anything. It might sell your shit, but it's still going to feel like this push. And so, yeah, that's I'm 100% all about that. That's why I really call in the kinds of clients into the agency that have done that work and really already feel in like a deep resonance and alignment with their own purpose on the planet.
Yes.
So,
that's when ads work better anyways.
Yeah, exactly. Ads work much better. And we don't want to have to be pulling teeth over here. So yeah, something else came to me while you're talking and I'm trying to recall it now. Yeah. So, I know what it was. So one thing that I feel like a lot of people who maybe aren't already in the world, or maybe they are, I don't know, of entheogens and plant medicines, but one thing I really want to address is this whole notion of like, of this being a traditionally indigenous practice, right? And who are we as white women coming into it to talk about these things, and how can we address the perception of cultural appropriation and be respectful of indigenous populations that carried the torch for so long of the plant medicines? How can we be respectful of that tradition while also continuing to carry the torch with them to a more mainstream audience? Is that something you'd be willing to speak about?
Yeah, it's funny. I just had this talk with someone recently. I mean, it's come up so much over the years. Here's the reality. The reality is we are living in 2022 when we're recording this, and there is this demand around the world, right? Like there's a high demand for people seeking healing. So I just like to acknowledge that there is a reality, right? Like people are called to these medicines because there's a point where they actually do work, like they work along with proper integration and getting other support that have nothing to do with the medicines. But it's, this is a reason why, let's say, psychedelic therapy is growing in popularity, because there's a demand for it. There's a lot of chaos and trauma on the planet. What I've learned, and what I've come to believe is that it's all about bringing it into right relation. So I just had this talk with a friend a few weeks ago about this notion that, yeah, there are people called to this, and then there are people who are like overusing it, right? And this is kind of like, I mean, this goes with anything, including something like, let's say, psilocybin that is so easy to grow, you can grow it in like your house, right? So it's not like you're pulling it all off the earth and reducing the resources available on the planet. So something like psilocybin is pretty highly regenerative. Like you don't need a lot, you can grow a lot, but it still comes down to this question of like, well, why do you need it again? Do you need to do more? Do you need to go bigger? Do you need it every weekend? Do you need to do combo, which is, the frog venom that, of course, people are like, oh, combo doesn't hurt frogs. Well, yeah, it does, actually. It's like there are maybe a few people that are doing it in, a conscious way where it's not destroying the population, but it actually is affecting the entire ecosystem of where that frog came from. If you pull it out of its natural habitat and you're messing around with it, I mean, yes, then it becomes intrusive. And we're seeing this with a lot of, it's like happening with pretty much every medicine out there. So that's one thing I think every human can really do to aid to this, is to really sit with yourself and ask, like, do I really need this again? And what is my intention for this again? Like, do you need to do combo every month? Okay, if you're just doing it because it feels good, if you're doing it because, like, one of my good friends is using it to clear her Lyme disease that she's suffering from, maybe it's another story, So that's one thing. And I think this has been talked about out there by a lot of people, even ayahuasca, even something regenerative and, fairly easy to grow. Things like toad medicine, it's like, again, this is such a powerful experience. Why do you need it more than once in your entire life? Like, I've done it twice in my life. And once 5 years ago and once like a year ago. And when I did it a year ago, it was the smallest dose possible. And, it's like, we don't need to be doing these things on a regular basis. And this is where I would really ask yourself, well, are you doing the day-to-day work that's like very simple, like the meditation, the chanting, the breath work, like all the tools available, getting out on the earth? So that's one thing that I think everybody on this path really needs to ask themselves, like, what's your intention to doing this again and again and again and again and again? Like, even me as someone who does this like for a living, it's like, I don't do it that much anymore. And not only that, when I do it, it's like very deep intention and very little dosage, because I don't believe that it's about like more, because that is actually the biggest root of what's happened with these medicines, with the indigenous peoples, is that there is this colonialistic attitude of like more, like let's take. So it's really like an as above, so below conversation around like, okay, well, it's not just give some money back to these indigenous peoples so that they're feeling good about all the medicine that's getting taken from them. It's really like, well, what's at the root of this? So yes, there's a demand. And yes, some people truly do need these medicines for like genuine healing. But at the same time, you can also access this level of healing with proper integration practices, proper daily practices. There's like thousands of practices that take no medicine that get you the exact same results. So that's one of these things where it's like, there's this huge demand. The world is chaotic. People are turning to the quickest fix, which now the mainstream media loves to talk about. It's like, oh, this heals depression. Just do this, do that. But actually, we really have to go deeper into ourselves and ask, like, how do we get this into right balance? This is like anything. It's like over exercising or doing too much yoga to the point where you get injured. Like, it's the same thing. It's just different levels. It's like a different, just a different thing. And so that's one conversation that because I didn't even realize, because again, I'm in like my own bubble. I didn't realize people were like using so many of these medicines on such a fairly regular basis. And I was like, wow, do you really need that? Like every weekend or once a month even? Like there's a point where you need to actually stop and integrate it. So that's at the root of it. And then there's deeper questions around where do we get this balance of meeting the demand and the need out there on the planet, and then bringing it into the right relationship and sacred reciprocity with these communities. Part of the bigger issue that people don't like to talk about here in general is that a lot of these indigenous communities, like they're not living off the land. They are not farmers that grow food and are living out of society. They actually have houses, they buy food, they need gas in their tanks of their scooters, Like they're actually a lot of them are very integrated into modern life. So of course there's a demand for money. So because of this high demand of, like working with all these sacred medicines, of course, then it becomes like the greed of like, okay, these people want to bring it to the West because there's a demand they can make money. These people want to sell it to them because there's a demand they can make money. But this all comes back to, okay, well, maybe if there wasn't as much of that crazy, like, popularity demand, maybe it would slow down, get it more into balance. There's a lot of people out there working on different initiatives to support communities that grow these medicines, to make sure that there's like more sustainable growing. And then again, like, I think that's one of the bigger issues that needs to be discussed. It's like, yes, maybe these belong to indigenous people, but I try not to see it that way, because the reality is, we're all human. Like I've had this conversation with my shaman who's considered an indigenous Peruvian, Shipibo man who comes from this lineage. Like this is where he's raised. This is his community. Um, people that I talk to believe that, hey, this is because people need healing. They're not coming from a scarcity mindset of like, no, it's just ours for ourselves. They're like, oh, whoever feels called to heal can have this. So there's another reality to it too, which is it is medicine from the earth for people. It's like it is for everybody. So I actually don't agree with that whole like, oh, the mushrooms came from Mexico, therefore no one can have it except this one indigenous community in Mexico. That's ridiculous. And if you speak to a lot of people from these lineages, they actually believe in healing and unity. They don't believe in hoarding for themselves, because again, that becomes like very ego based. So I think there's a lot of questions about how do we get into right relationship. And then there's also a lot of human projecting of our own, egos and guilt and, like trying to save the world complexes. And I get it, like I'm not a fan of unsustainable harvesting. I'm not a fan of people going and doing these every single week, or people just doing it for the wrong reasons and just making money instead of, or not giving back to the communities. Like I could go on, but we really, this is about bringing everything into balance, which is essentially the biggest lesson on the planet is like, how do we bring all of it into balance? It's like, we can't just keep dumping garbage on the planet. We can't just keep, making emissions that are ruining, potentially like causing a hole in the ozone. It's like, it's all intertwined. But we're all trying to do our best. And the reality is one person can't like change all the world's problems. But if everybody starts being conscious of how they work with these medicines and actually like, where is it coming from? Who's growing it? How is it harvested? How long has it been growing? What's the lineage? Like, where are these people from? Are they being paid properly? Or is this being imported? I mean, I could go on and on. Like ask the questions. Don't just like go into it without any consciousness. Find out the lineage and how this is getting to you. It's the same thing as like getting food on your plate. Yeah, you can open something in a package, or you can question, where did this come from and what was made, and how was it made and what's the intention behind it? So it's kind of, it's this larger picture, but I don't believe in pulling the plug and just saying, okay, now no one can do ayahuasca unless you're from these 4 regions of the world where it came from. Like you can't, I don't think they would even agree with it. So, but again, it's like balance. And I think one of the biggest issues is the human ego. The ego just wants more. And that's, again, this comes down to like a very simple practice of getting your ego in check, and that requires no medicine whatsoever. So that's what I really encourage people to do is like, ask yourself, like, maybe there's a more simple way that doesn't involve constantly taking, like sitting and meditating every day is very easy. It requires no money and no medicine.
Yeah.
Does that answer that? Yeah.
Totally. And I think you really captured the sort of the complexity, of finding that balance, and the availability of this medicine, and how much we need to respect the source, from whence it comes, the people, the land, and the spirit of the medicine itself. And self-responsibility, I think, is the big key takeaway of what you just said for me, is that big self-responsibility piece. That means like really investigating what your intention is and where it's coming from, and even like talking to the plant, whether it's in front of you or not, like speaking to like the mama ayahuasca, or grandfather wachuma, or whatever you want to call it, like having that dialogue with it. That's like, hey, I'm very curious about this medicine, and I would love to be shown sort of the best way for me to come to it.
Yes.
And I believe wholeheartedly that if you make that prayer, if you're listening right now and you make that prayer, that the medicine will show up for you.
Yes, that's actually, what, it's funny. I actually have a whole blog post that I wrote about because I get contacted for medicine all the time, and I made a promise many years ago to just not refer anybody to anyone at all. So I actually have a whole blog post that I wrote about this. It's like, here's how to call medicine into your life. And it does come back to your prayer, you know, and that's like, I agree. It's like, you don't need to go blow your brains out if you actually just have a very like clear intentional practice, and it doesn't require anything. It's like, you don't, I mean, I always say this, like none of us even need these medicines at all, period.
Right.
You know, and if we keep doing them at the level they're going at, like there might not be any left. Who knows? I hope not. I don't believe that to be true, but you know, it's like things like the toad and peyote and these endangered plants and animals. It's like, yeah, well, if people are just going and doing peyote recreationally, like for fun and not really using it in the proper manner, that's like, you know, with a certain like sacred spiritual practice, like, yeah, eventually we'll run out of it, because it's like, you know, the human demand is just outpacing the growth of something that takes so many years to grow. So, I mean, we'll see. But again, this is kind of like the larger issue that's happening on the entire planet. You know, it's like,
I was going to say, what a horrible irony if the greed and egoism of the last several thousand years of this planet ends up devastating the plant medicine world. Let's just not let that happen, y'all.
Well, I know
let's not let that happen.
It's like when you read on the news that they're like, oh, we're entering into the 7th mass extinction and the glaciers are melting and then like the jet stream is changing. And I mean, it's like, I don't know. Well, okay. What are we doing about it? So I mean, I don't know. I'm usually very optimistic, but again, like, what's happening in one realm, like one little tiny niche on this planet, is the same. It's like as above, so below. It's happening in the collective. And I really believe, you know, the irony with these medicines is that it really, you know, I do believe it's the earth talking to us and through us, is that these medicines are hopefully going to have us change this relationship with how we see the earth and how we're treating the earth. So maybe it is better that we just get all the medicine out there, because maybe it'll help change the bigger pictures on the planet. I don't know. I mean, I've had this conversations with people before where it's like, well, people are saying, don't do toad, you know, the toads going extinct, running out. But then I'm like, I don't know. Maybe if everyone doing this medicine is what's actually going to wake up and make change on the planet to actually then save you know, like the larger picture, I don't know. Maybe that's why ayahuasca is everywhere. You know, I've said it for years. I'm like, there's a reason why its vines have spread to every part of this world. It's not, you know, I know a lot of people on the internet, especially in the psychedelics world, like to talk about like greed and narcissism and blah, blah, blah. But, you know, the plant also has its own agenda at some level, exactly. You know? So
just like
we kind of
does.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, we can't just
we believe that, yeah. I mean, I've had this conversation with people about human to human soul contracts before entering this planet. Well, the plants have also entered into a contract in theory, you know, and it's very possible. And again, everything in right relationship, balance, self-responsibility, care, prayer, love, all of that. And it's very possible that beautiful toad that creates the bufo medicine entered into this realm knowing that it very possibly would be depleted at some point in self-sacrifice to a greater vision of a global awakening that would rescue the whole freaking humanity.
That's the thing. Well, and this is where, because it's just so interesting to watch like the world and social media, and especially the psychedelics world that I'm in, where I agree. So the Buddhist perspective, which I've always taken, is that like, who's to say what's right or wrong, like, or good or bad, or, you know, like I kind of believe in this place of like, yes, the human ego likes to point blame at everything, right? Like we see this all over the world. Like it's that, and everybody's just pointing the finger externally. But you know, if we stop and take a look, it's like we actually don't know that ayahuasca around the world is a bad thing. We don't know if it's a good thing either. We don't know if, yeah, maybe using it all up and depleting it in 4 years is a great thing. Who knows? Like, who's to say what's right or wrong or good or bad? But of course, there's definitely this human ego. And I think most of what we're seeing out there in these arguments of people like yelling at each other and canceling each other and pointing fingers at each other comes back to not looking internally at like, how am I living? What am I doing? And if every human on this planet just took a minute to actually question, like, well, what is my intention for this? Like, what am I doing? Do I really need this? Am I really feeling like called to this today? Then maybe it would work. But I think the whole like blaming everyone else is kind of like, I don't know if it's really going to get us anywhere. I think coming up with like viable solutions, like bring everything into balance, like that's a different story. And I also, it might be called spiritual bypassing, but I think, I believe that everything is happening for a reason, like including something quite negative, right? Like what we would maybe call negative. Like if we deplete all the peyote on the planet or all the toads on the planet, okay, well, I don't know, like you just said, it's like, well, maybe that's actually okay. Like who's to say what's right or wrong? I mean, I would be sad. I don't believe in killing off an entire species of creature on this planet, but then, I believe there's also something bigger at play here that we just don't know about and we don't see, it's like, everything right now in the world is like no one can agree on anything, it seems these days, right? So there's a lot of like arrows being shot at one another, but I'm a big fan of, instead of just shooting the arrows outward, like go and do your own inner work and constantly just ask yourself, like, well, what in me can I do to change myself? And if everybody on this planet turned inward, it would actually reflect on the external, in the collective. And I just think one of the biggest issues is people are so disconnected from themselves and their hearts and their souls and the planet that it's much easier to just sling mud at everybody else. And it's like, well, maybe we should just stop and like ask ourselves the questions at every moment, and do our own internal work. And I think that's where I always try to take this very neutral approach to like, we don't know what's right or wrong or good or bad. I'll never forget, I got in an argument with my Buddhist teacher, who I love very dearly, when Trump was elected. I mean, of course, I was like totally in shock and like, damn, man, I didn't think that would actually happen. But the first thing I did, which is, again, like coming from this place of like, well, maybe this is here for some reason. It's like any darkness, any shadow, any... like same thing with what's happening with medicines or, over harvesting or like being in wrong relation with the planet. Maybe this needs to happen. Maybe we actually need to bring this planet to the brink of destruction in order to make changes. Because so far it's like we're being told that there's a mass extinction and people are just still like chilling out on Instagram. That includes me, by the way. But you know what I mean? And it's like, well, maybe we need to have shit really hit the fan for real in order to make change. Or, maybe every plant medicine needs to go extinct before people are like, ooh, we did something wrong, So it's like, who's to say what's right or wrong? We don't know what's right or wrong. We just know what's right or wrong for ourselves. And if everybody took radical self-responsibility for living a conscious life that is aligned with themselves and really tapped into their heart and soul, I do believe we would actually have a certain level of world peace, because we wouldn't be like constantly just projecting outward. We would learn how to love ourselves, which is connected to how much love we give to the earth and each other and, the toads and the plants and the environment, everything. It's all interconnected, but it's like I interviewed Charles Eisenstein and he talked about this. It's all disconnection from self, which is, no one wants to go inward because it's really uncomfortable and it's so much easier to just sling mud outward.
It brings us back to your purpose, which, and mine and many of the people that I talk to, which is it's love and it's intimacy with oneself, like deep intimacy with oneself. So I'm so grateful for the work that you do and your perspective and for these beautiful plant medicines that we both adore. How can people find you and potentially work with you?
Thank you. Oh, it was so great to be here. So I can be found all over the internet at BethAWeinstein.com. Beth Weinstein on Instagram. My podcast is Psychedelic Entrepreneur, Medicine for These Times. I have, Facebook. I'm all over the place. But if you find Sarah, you can find me.
That's
But yeah,
right.
reach out. Yeah.
We'll have links in the notes, and So if you find me, you can find Beth. Find Beth on Instagram, on the interwebs, on the Facebooks.
Yes.
And she's magical. Thank you so much for being here and for your beautiful forthrightness and brilliance.
Thank you for having me. I love you, Sarah. I cannot wait to get back to Costa Rica.
Maybe someday we'll sit in ceremony together.
Oh my God. Yes. I plan to be there as soon as it starts to get cold out here.
It's a good time. Good time to come.
Yeah. Like right after Thanksgiving was a good time. So yeah, be on the lookout for a place for me to live out there.
Absolutely. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next time. Sending you all tons and tons of love.
Bye.